age of strong leaders, where is peace headed? What peace means in a realist era. Across the world today, strong leaders are once again gaining presence. Realism, deterrence, self-reliance, national pride. These keywords have returned to the center of international politics. Yet when every country speaks first in the language of power, what kind of future does the word peace actually point to? Watching the currents of global affairs, I have been trying to think about peace through several lenses: power and peace, dialogue and equilibrium, moderation and realism. As someone who has long lived along cultural borders, standing between the stillness and turbulence of this era, I find myself asking again, what, in such a time, does peace truly mean? 1. Japan's first female prime minister, and a new kind of strength. Japan has entered an unprecedented moment. Its first female prime minister, Sanae Takaichi, has taken office. She is widely labeled conservative, realist, hawkish, and has become a symbol of a new political mood. Her approval rating once exceeded 70%, an exceptional surge of public expectation for strong leadership. Watching this scene, I could not help returning to the old question that never quite vanishes: what is peace? Military power, economic security, national interest. Debates around these themes are heating up everywhere, and more leaders now openly speak in the grammar of strength, placing it ahead of dialogue. This is not just a policy shift. It feels like a wider change in atmosphere. Power has moved back to the center, and peace is being forced to redefine itself. That is why the question presses harder than before. In an age like this, what direction can peace still have? 2. Tense stability under a balance of power. Even in the 21st century, war has not disappeared. Ukraine, Gaza, Sudan, Myanmar. Somewhere on this planet, flames keep burning. Yet leaders everywhere still speak of peace, each offering their own definition. But the peace they invoke is often built on fear and deterrence, a precarious balance, a stability that looks firm on the surface but could crumble at any moment. In the United States, Donald Trump calls for peace through strength. In China, Xi Jinping speaks of the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. In Russia, Vladimir Putin justifies external military action. In the name of national security, we had no other choice for Russia's security. In Japan, Prime Minister Takaichi likewise raises the banners of a resolute national posture and stronger deterrence. All these movements point to the same reality. This is an era that trusts power more than dialogue, an era in which realism once again governs world politics. North Korea also firmly refuses denuclearization. As its UN statement was reported, "We will never give up nuclear, which is our state law." national policy, and sovereign power, as well as the right to existence. This logic may sound extreme, but it rests on assumptions that are now widely shared, that security is decided by power. I am not defending North Korea's position, yet behind that logic, we can still recognize a fear of weakness, a dread of humiliation, an instinct for survival that every state carries. When every nation claims it protects peace through strength, it becomes harder to dismiss North Korea's security logic as a mere anomaly. Perhaps what its bluntness reveals instead is a deeper unease running through the international system itself. 3. Power and dialogue, not opposites but historical preconditions. Leaders often say, "We value dialogue." Yet one stubborn question remains. If one side has no power, can dialogue truly exist? Dialogue in international politics is negotiation. And negotiation cannot stand on equal ground when one party lacks minimum capability. Power is not the opposite of dialogue. A certain balance of power is often the condition that makes dialogue possible. That is precisely why North Korea refuses to abandon nuclear weapons. In the 2025 UN General Assembly, its delegate declared, "Calls for North Korea to denuclearize are tantamount to demanding that it surrender sovereignty and right to existence." We do not reject dialogue, but negotiations premised on denuclearization are meaningless. These words lay bare a cold structure of modern politics. Dialogue without power is, for many states, not recognized as dialogue at all. Power does not always destroy dialogue. More often, it is what allows dialogue to begin. History makes the same point. The Roman Pax Romana and the Cold War's logic of mutual assured destruction were both forms of peace sustained by overwhelming power. A balance kept by fear and a stability kept by trust may share the same name, peace, but they are fundamentally different in kind. Hobbes argued in Leviathan that a powerful sovereign is needed to suppress the fear of violence, a peace built on dread, a frozen stillness. Kant, in Perpetual Peace, sought another foundation: republican governance, reduced standing armies, and federations among states, peace supported by institutions and trust. Modern international politics constantly oscillates between Hobbesian deterrence and Kantian institutionalism. In such a landscape, the position I lean toward is a moderated realism, accepting the necessity of deterrence in the real world, while refusing to abandon the long work of building institutions and trust. And the form of power keeps evolving. Where military force once carried deterrence alone, today information has become a weapon of comparable weight. In the Russia-Ukraine war, Russia spread the false narrative that Ukraine's army is neo-Nazi, aiming to fracture global opinion. Ukraine, in turn, used social media to push images of ruined villages and civilian grief into the world's bloodstream within hours, gaining sympathy and support. In this era, cognition itself is a battlefield. Resonance can be converted into national power. The front line is no longer only on maps. It exists in our minds and in the flows of information that shape them. Those who control information can tilt public sentiment, reshape perceptions, and even shift the balance of international relations. Information warfare is no longer an auxiliary tool of war. It is strategy in its own right, a new form of deterrence. In an age where policies are decided on cognitive battlefields, the ability to discern truth, information literacy, is becoming a pillar of security. That is why countries now place AI, communications, and media at the core of national strategy, not only because of military realities, but because maintaining a balance of information between truth and falsehood, emotion and reason has become one of the conditions for peace itself. 4. From an era of cooperation to an era of self-reliance and deterrence. The post-WW2 world was long described as an era of dialogue and cooperation. But we must remember what lay beneath that peace: the overwhelming power of a single superpower, the United States. Pax Americana was an order maintained through American military and economic dominance. The UN, NATO, free trade regimes, the dollar system, even as multilateral frameworks, they ultimately depended on US deterrence and influence. Recent conflicts in Ukraine and the Middle East have exposed a hard reality. The UN, constrained by vetoes and rivalries, often cannot mediate as it was meant to. The world has moved beyond an era in which one order could hold peace in place. We have entered a stage where each state pursues its own version of an acceptable peace. In other words, the so-called 70 years of post-war peace was not founded on idealism beyond power. It was a stability sustained by the presence of overwhelming force. Cooperation was possible because behind it stood a power that no one dared casually defy. But in the 21st century, that structure has begun to loosen. America's relative advantage has weakened. China has risen as a new heavyweight. The world is shifting from unipolarity to multipolarity. In this configuration, even a small economy with nuclear weapons like North Korea can become a pole capable of influencing order. With power dispersed, no state can guarantee absolute stability. For decades, Japan lived as a nation of given peace under the American security umbrella. But as that umbrella begins to tremble, Japan is forced to face a new choice: to remain a peace nation protected by others, or to become a nation that constructs peace for itself. This is a shift from bestowed peace to chosen peace, from passive peace to active peace, from dependent security to autonomous security. 5. China's rejuvenation and the logic of moderation. Xi Jinping's vision of the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation is not merely a slogan. He has called it the greatest dream of the Chinese nation in modern times. It carries a memory of humiliation under foreign powers and the civilizational will to return to the center of world affairs, not a geographic center, but a cultural and spiritual one. Xi repeatedly emphasizes that China loves peace and will never seek hegemony or expansion, even as it grows stronger. Beneath this claim lies a Confucian logic of moderation, not passive softness, but an active posture meant to keep equilibrium, rejecting external imposition and sustaining order at China's own pace. If Western peace thought leans on contract, law, and justice, from Plato and Aristotle to Kant, seeking stability through shared rules, then Eastern peace thought leans on harmony, restraint, and ritual, as in the Analects and the doctrine of the mean, seeking stability through calibration of relationships, punishing violators to preserve order versus adjusting relationships to prevent disorder. This philosophical divide separates Western realism from Eastern moderation. In this sense, China's rejuvenation can be read as an attempt to extend a moderation-based order into wider international space. From China's perspective, this is a defensive effort to maintain balance. From neighboring states' perspectives, it often appears overly forceful, even threatening. That perception gap is itself a driver of regional tension. South China Sea disputes, the Belt and Road Initiative, moves around Taiwan and the East China Sea. China sees security and self-reliance. Others often see expansion of influence. I was educated in China myself. I understand that within this expression of strength, there is also a defensive reflex, a long historical memory of external pressure and humiliation. So rather than seeing China only as hardline, it is worth also recognizing the internal desire to maintain equilibrium and never again fall into vulnerability. Real dialogue begins by acknowledging this complexity. 6. Japanese peace consciousness, the culture of harmony and its paradox. Japan has long been known as a society that values harmony. Avoiding conflict and preserving order are moral virtues and daily rhythms here. Yet history shows a paradox. This very nation of harmony once entered the path of war under the banner of national defense. Living in Japan for over 25 years, I have often felt how deeply people cherish peace, with closeness and almost reverence. Whether this is an objective trend or simply my personal impression, I cannot say. But a quiet culture of valuing peace does run through this society. This sentiment is rooted not only in aversion to war, but in a millennium-long tradition of harmony. Prince Shotoku's 17-article constitution opens with the line, "Regard harmony as most precious." The value of avoiding discord has shaped Japanese life for more than 1,000 years. Yet we also must not forget the country that held up harmony once moved toward war, driven not only by militarism, but perhaps also by defensive anxiety. Modern Japan watched China fall into semi-colonial status under Western imperialism. A national fear took hold. We must never become the humiliated one. That fear may have slipped into a logic of offense in the name of self-defense. This defensive psychology is not entirely unrelated to the anxieties shaping today's international climate. After the war, Japan embraced the pacifism of Article 9, not as a vow of disarmament, but as a national commitment to preventing the repetition of war's tragedy. In that sense, Takaichi's push for stronger defense is not merely military policy. It is also a means to secure symmetrical diplomacy, especially in negotiations with the United States. Military capability becomes a modern bargaining chip, deterrence as a foundation for dialogue, not simply a display of force. Under Trump's second administration, Japan again faced heavy pressure from Washington. Tariffs on automobiles and parts, demands for higher security contributions. In such a context, raising defense spending is not only a military response, it is also Japan's way of saying, we intend to negotiate as a responsible ally on a more equal footing. Tariffs, technology, resources, all of these are arenas of national bargaining. Just as deterrence requires capability, economic self-reliance is an indispensable base. Thus, strengthening defense and rebuilding economic foundations are not isolated agendas. They are the realistic supports that make genuine dialogue possible. Peace does not begin by denying power. It begins by understanding what power means and practicing its restraint. Japan's post-war pacifism is now shifting from passive idealism to a realism of protection, a moderated peace shaped by a nation that rejects war yet knows its weight. 7. What counts as peace? Silence or dialogue? Is global peace truly being maintained? What kind of peace are we actually living in? Does it genuinely deserve to be called peace? These questions feel more urgent now than ever. Peace takes many forms. A silence sustained by fear, a quiet bought through obedience, a tense balance held by deterrence, and a coexistence upheld through continued dialogue. All are called peace, yet their essences differ completely. If what we call peace is merely the quiet that comes from lowering our voices, then it is not peace born of confidence, but a negative peace held together by fear. True peace is not the absence of friction. It lives in the condition where people with different positions still choose to speak, to misunderstand, to try again, and to keep the conversation alive. Only in that ongoing effort, in coexistence, sustained by dialogue, can a positive peace emerge? This kind of peace does not demand uniformity of opinion. It begins by acknowledging difference and still seeking a shared ground. At the 1955 Bandung Conference, Zhou Enlai proposed the principle, see common ground, while reserving differences. Recognizing difference, while still searching for a common direction. This is the heart of peace through dialogue. Dialogue cannot erase value gaps, but continuing to speak, even while knowing those gaps remain, is itself the condition of coexistence and the only path beyond fearful peace. For Japan, the most realistic road ahead is neither isolation nor blind alignment. It lies in layered interdependence, security, trade, information, energy, while strengthening both deterrence and dialogue. In other words, peace must be built as a layered structure, power and institutions, deterrence and trust, stacked together. 8. Peace is not a choice, but a continuing question. What kind of peace is ideal? I do not have a fixed answer. Peace has always changed with the times, shaped by continuous human searching. Peace is not a destination. It is a route, re-examined again and again within the tides of history. Every era has people who ask, "What is peace?" Guided by that question, they choose methods anew and adjust their direction. Human stability may depend on this constant act of questioning and revising ourselves. I do not intend to resist the era's current, nor to surrender to it. I want to remain a calm observer, a steady thinker, someone who keeps asking. Perhaps to contemplate peace is to face the mirror of this era and reflect on ourselves. Rather than idealizing one fixed form of peace, what I value is the act of questioning itself, the refusal to stop reflecting. No matter how the world changes, we must not lose the question, what is peace? For ordinary people like us, continuing to ask may be the most realistic way to participate in peace. Peace may never be a conclusion, but a question repeated with every generation. About the author. An ethnic Korean, born in Yanbian, China, and living in Japan. Writing in multiple languages and cultures, the author captures fragments of memory and emotion through poetry and essays.